We're talking about the three different branches of the Texas government, and the first one we're going to talk about is the legislative branch. And so this is the House and the Senate of the state, and the Texas Legislature. So let's take I'd like to say a 35,000-foot view, like an overview. We're going to talk about the legislative branch that makes the laws, that's the House and the Senate. The executive branch, that'll be another lecture. They enforce the laws, that's the governor and the lieutenant governor. And then the judicial branch, like we talked about, interprets the law, and that is the judges. So we're going to only focus on the very first piece of this, is the legislative branch. And kind of the way that we're going to go through this lecture is we're going to have an overview of the legislative branch, talk about elections, what the legislature does, the leadership that we have in Texas, how a bill becomes a law, and the other jobs of the legislature. Okay, so in the United States, all of the state legislatures are bicameral, like the United States, which means that they have two houses. In Texas, it's the House of Representatives and the Senate. Same in the United States, United States legislature. Except Nebraska. Nebraska only has a unicameral, one house of their legislative branch. The legislative branch is supposed to be the citizen rulers, so people like you and me who were elected to help lead the state and lead the country. One house checks the other house, so that's why there's two houses. So the Senate can't just run away and do something crazy without the House approving it, and vice versa. And they have relatively equal power, except that the Senate has approval power. So the Senate is able to approve the executive orders. The Texas Legislature meets for 140 days every other year. So they don't meet every year, and they don't meet all the time. This is not a 40-hour-a-week, 50-week-a-year job. In 46 states, the legislature meets every year. And Texas is the only one in the top 10 largest states that meets every other year, which is interesting. You would think that a state as big as Texas would need their legislative branch to be working every single year, not just every other year. There are no term limits in the Texas legislature, so if you want to be a legislator for your entire career and you keep getting elected, so be it. The Texas House serves 2-year terms, and the Texas Senate serves 4-year terms. Every 10 years after the census, which is why it's very important for you to fill out your census every time that it comes around, there's redistricting. And at that point, everybody gets reelected. Some senators may be in the middle of their 4-year term. They've only served 2 years of their 4-year term. And so the senators, if, for example, if there are 2 people that are going to need to, go away from redistricting, lots are drawn to see who serves the 2 years. In the Texas legislature, there are 31 senators and 150 representatives. The senators, like I said, serve for 4 years. They have to be at least 26 years old, citizens of the United States, a resident of Texas for 5 years, and a resident of their district for 1 year. Representatives serve for 2 years. They must be at least 21 years old, citizens of the United States, resident of Texas for 2 years, and a resident of the district for 1 year. In order to be elected, you have to be the right age. You have to have had the right citizenship and the right residency requirements, but you also have some unofficial factors that you have to have in order to get elected. You have to be able to raise money. You can't run and not have any money raised, I guess, unless you're independently wealthy. But you generally have to have the ability to raise money. In the 2016 election cycle, the Texas House raised $217,000 for their campaigns on average, and the Senate raised $583,000 for their campaign on average. For 389 elected seats, $99 million was spent on electing our legislature. You have to be affiliated with a party. That just gives you a lot more power and a lot more built-in voters. You have to have enough money that you don't have to work for the 140 days every other year. If you're a small business owner and you're a solo business owner, you probably can't take off 140 days. But so usually it's somebody who's owns a business that has a lot of people employed that the business can run without them for 140 days, or a lawyer, because lawyers can do their work kind of on top of at the same time as legislative work. And unofficially, you have to be educated. Even though 25% of Texans have a college degree, 73% of legislators do. And only 4% of people in the Texas Legislature have not been to college at all, have no college experience. The demographics in Texas of our legislature is that even though Texas is a minority majority, meaning that most people in Texas are not white. So you see on this little pie, most people are something other than the blue pie piece that represents Anglos, but the Texas Legislature is still a majority Anglo. So House members represent about 167,000 people. So there's one House member for every 167,000 people. And in the Senate, there's one House member for every about 811,000 people in Texas. You'll see with this bar graph, the blue lines show the Texas population. The red lines show what the legislature looks like. So you'll see, for example, the Anglos, the Texas legislature has 64% Anglo, but Texas itself, only 42% of Texans are Anglo. And so you'll see, for example, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans are all underrepresented in the Texas legislature, but Anglos are overrepresented. Talk about male and female. 50% of the population is female, 50% is male, but 20% of the Texas legislature is female, meaning that females are underrepresented, and 80% of the Texas legislature is male, meaning males are overrepresented. When we talk about redistricting, the it kind of is based on the one person, one vote premise. And so that's why when we talked about, you know, Senate members are representing about 811,000 people, that means that every Senate district is roughly 811,000 people in size. So the one person, one vote means that districts are drawn on population, not on just, you know, the size of the city. So when you look at a map, you will see that some places like in Dallas and Arlington and Tarrant County, the districts are very, very tiny in order to represent that number of people. But then when you move out to like West Texas, the districts may be huge. They would have to be a huge amount of land in order to get to that 811,000 people. When there are unequal districts, that's called malapportionment, and that is not, it's not what our government is founded on. Our government is founded on equal districts, so that it's one person, one vote, and nobody's vote is more valuable than another person's. The legislature is the one who performs the redistricting after the census, and they do that unless they can't agree. If they can't agree, then there is a legislative redistricting board. That is the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, attorney general, controller, commissioner of the general land office. They get together and they perform the redistricting. You may have heard the word gerrymandering before. Gerrymandering is when districts are drawn in a certain way to benefit or harm a certain group of voters. If you have partisan gerrymandering, saying you draw your district lines so that all Republicans are in one district, or that Republicans have a majority in a number of districts, that's fine. That is not illegal. But if you are drawing districts in such a way to prevent a certain race or ethnic group from having equal representation, then that is not okay. It violates the 14th Amendment. It violates the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which says that you cannot dilute the minority vote. We've talked about the Voting Rights Act. Probably you've heard about it in the news a lot. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 held that Texas and 8 other states that have a history of having a difficult time drawing maps that protected the voting rights of different ethnic minority groups, have to submit their maps to the U.S. Department of Justice or a federal district court for the District of Columbia for approval before they can have the maps of the districts redrawn. That was until 2013. The Voting Rights Act stopped requiring that, or Texas stopped being required to submit their maps because the Voting Rights Act was held to be, you know, no longer applicable. And so, but for many years, from 1965 to 2013, Texas and 8 other states, all in the South, had to submit our maps for approval before we could just redistrict everything. So there's different kinds of gerrymandering. So gerrymandering can employ something called cracking, which is dividing up a group so that it is so diluted that it can have any power. So, for example, if you have 3 districts and you draw the districts in such a way that Democrats in those 3 districts are the minority in each of those districts, then that ensures that the Republicans are going to have political control over those 3 districts. Packing would be when you concentrate all of one group into one district, so they don't have the opportunity to gain power in multiple districts. So if you have those 3 districts again, and you put all of the Democrats in one district, well, then they'll have control of that district. They won't have any say in the other 2 districts. And then pairing is when the lines are drawn so that 2 incumbents face each other in an election so that one will lose. So if you have 2 districts next to each other that have, for example, have Republicans in power, the Democrats may want to draw the lines so that the 2 Republican incumbents have to face each other so that one of them will lose. Incumbency means the person who's currently in that job, that seat of government, who is up for re-election. So in the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump was the incumbent because he was already the president, and he was up for re-election. And the incumbent, just kind of painting with a very broad brush throughout all elections, federal and state and local and everywhere, incumbents have the huge advantage of being re-elected for a number of reasons. So in these maps, this shows different kind of ways you can draw the lines to give certain groups power and keep certain groups from having power. So it's the same exact configuration on the left and the right. But on the left, you can see that all 4, let's see if I can draw on this. On the left, you can see that all 4 of these different districts have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. And then you can see that there is a way to draw the lines so that you can make all of the Republicans, or the Republicans, be in power in District 4, but the Democrats remain in power in Districts 1, 2, and 3. So District 4 would have packed all of the Republicans into one district, and they would have cracked the Republican bloc in Districts 1, 2, and 3 so that they did not ever gain power in those districts. So let's talk about the people who represent the districts around kind of northeast Fort Worth, Tarrant County, College, Northeast District area. So there is Stephanie Click, who is a Republican. She serves as the chair of the Elections Committee, serves on the Human Services Committee. She has a background. She was a graduate of Birdville ISD. She attended TCU and got a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing. She was first elected in 2012, but has been re-elected as of November 2020, and she will be serving until the end of 2021. Jonathan Stickland is a Republican from District 92. He serves on the County Affairs and Land and Resource Management Committees. He also attended Birdville ISD, attended TCC, and Parkland College studying marketing. He operates a consulting company that offers data management, marketing, and sales for oil and gas companies. Again, he was elected in 2012 for the very first time. And then finally, Giovanni Capriolone. I really feel bad because I always mispronounce that. Is also a Republican, serves on a lot of committees, but is chair of the Appropriations Committee or subcommittee relating to infrastructure. And so that means that he is involved in what money is spent on highways, for example, by Texas. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in physics, an MBA in finance from Santa Clara University, and he has, his background is in a venture capital firm, so businessman. All of these people you can see are educated, and they're also white, with 2 of them males and 1 female. Now, as far as state senators, both of these state senators will serve until 2023, when they will be up for re-election. Senator Kelly Hancock is a Republican for District 9. He was first elected in 2012. He has a business degree from Baylor and a background in a family business that is called Advanced Chemical Logistics. And he is the chair of the Business and Commerce Committee and the vice chair of the Transportation Committee. Senator Beverly Powell is a Democrat. She was elected in 2018, so she is in her first term. She has a background, a Bachelor of Science from Texas Wesleyan and an MBA in education. She's a school board member in Burleson, Texas, which is south of the Metroplex. And she serves on the Education Committee and other committees relating to education and higher education. So what does a Texas legislator do? What is their job? Well, they have to pass bills, which are new laws. They change old laws. They deal with a lot of budgeting, where money goes, things like that. They have to pass resolutions, which is just an expression of legislative sentiment. That just means they'll pass a resolution to recognize somebody for an achievement, or say that they support or do not support a certain action. There can be a simple resolution passed by either one house or the other, the House of Representatives or the Senate, a joint resolution that can be passed by both the Senate and the House of Representatives, or a concurrent resolution that is passed by the Senate, the House, and the governor, approved by the governor. Legislators' job is also to represent constituents, and that's the people that are living in their district, not the people that voted for them, but the people that live in their district, as a delegate or as a trustee. So the difference between these two is a delegate would be basically all of the people who voted, or all of the people who live in the district, tell the representative what they want the representative to do, and that representative has to go do it. Or a trustee, which just means that the district elected this representative, and the representative uses their own best judgment to determine whether or not to vote on a law or something like that. These are just two different ways that representatives go about their jobs. And so this is not, one's not legal or illegal, and one's not the best way. It's just two different approaches that representatives have. And then finally, legislators are responsible for overseeing and investigating state agencies. So making sure that no state agency is misappropriating money, doing something that is hiding documents or hiding information, so they can conduct operations and investigations. They can request documents. They can make you come and testify under oath before a committee of the legislature. And that's the way they watch state agencies. That's one of the ways they are performing a check on the executive branch. So what is the money involved in the legislative branch? So a special session, when you see that the governor calls a special session to deal with something, a special session costs about $1 million. And that's expensive, and you have to figure out a way to pay for that. Texas Constitution requires that the budget be balanced, and so a budget can't be passed with a deficit at the end of the budget. And so if you're going to call a special session, it has to be for something good because it's expensive. People that are in the Texas Legislature are paid $7,200 a year unless voters approve more. So like I said, when we talked about amendments, the voters are the ones that decide whether or not legislators get an increase. The last increase was in 1975, so it's been a bit since there's been a pay raise for the Texas Legislature. While they're in session, either regular session, special session, or in committee meetings, legislators get $190 per diem, meaning per day, to spend on expenses and things like that. The Texas Ethics Commission can approve more, but as it stands now, $190 per day. And they're also given a travel allowance so that they can travel from their districts to Austin to conduct business. So is there any way you're just paid your $7,200 and that's it? No, that's not the only place the money goes. Legislators, if they're an attorney, can get a retainer, and if they're not an attorney, they can get consulting fees, and that is just money that's given to them by people or companies in order to help support the legislator. And so you can see where that would be, if there's a big donor who is paying a hefty retainer fee to a local official, then that local official is going to make sure that they act in the best interest of that company that's paying them that fee. There is also a research staff that is available to the Texas Legislature. They are nonpartisan, and so just not hired by the Republicans or the Democrats. They're just a staff that helps them research information they may need in order to determine whether or not to vote on a certain bill or enact a certain committee recommendation. Lobbies provide research too. So again, this is a way that lobbyists can have access to elected officials. They can say, hey, I see you're voting on this appropriations bill that deals with how much money is going to be spent on athletics in the state. Then somebody may want to say, here's all this research about how great athletics are or how terrible they are, or, to try to get that, persuade the legislator to vote a certain way. There is a staff that is provided by lobbies, taxes, and campaign contributions. The staffs range in different sizes. They can be 3 people, they can be 14 people, they can be somewhere in the middle. That's the range of sizes in the Texas Legislature. Often legislators have an office in Austin, but also one in their home district. So sometimes you'll see a green sign that says, office of whoever, Jonathan Stickland, for example. and they'll have an office somewhere in the district where they can, meet with people, and the people and their constituency can come and have access to their elected official. So let's talk about leadership in the legislature. I talked about some people, that were head of certain committees, or had some sort of leadership roles in the legislature. The leaders in the legislature can refer bills to committee, which is the way a bill gets its first start to becoming a law. They can appoint committee members, appoint committee chairs. They preside over floor actions, so they can preside over what is happening on the floor. Is something being debated? Is something being filibustered? They deal with scheduling, which is very important. So is this bill going to get time to be heard on the schedule? Or are they going to is it going to get kicked to another session? They appoint conference committees and also break ties. If there's a tie in the Senate and the House, then they will break those ties. So the leader in the Texas Senate is the lieutenant governor. That is somebody that is elected. So that shows you that kind of the lieutenant governor has one foot in the executive branch because he's the lieutenant governor and would take over if the governor had to step down or something happened to them. And then he also has a foot in the legislative branch because he presides over the Texas Senate. And then our lieutenant governor in Texas right now is Dan Patrick from the Houston area. And then the Speaker of the House is the person who presides over the House. And the Speaker of the House is not chosen by a general election, but chosen by the House. So this is somebody who has been elected as a representative, and then the House decides who becomes the Speaker of the House. So currently the Speaker of the House in Texas is somebody named Dennis Bonnen, and he is from Angleton, so down near the Houston area. So we're going to talk about how a bill becomes a law now. The Legislative Council, or the Legislative Budget Board, will draft and analyze and kind of work out the nuts and bolts of a bill or a budget. And then the bill is introduced. It is referred to a committee. The committee takes some sort of an action, so they approve or don't approve. If they approve, then it is scheduled to be heard by the entire chamber. There is floor action, meaning it is read and considered by the chamber. It is sent to a conference committee, which just makes sure that the House version and the Senate version match up, kind of negotiates the different discrepancies, and then it's voted on and finally passed. So we will go through that a little bit, kind of in more detail. So there are special, general, or local bills. Special bills are just ways to carve out exceptions to a certain law. A general bill would be a bill that applied to everyone in the state. And then a local bill just applies to one piece of local government. A legislative council is a committee of, or a council of 14 people who research and draft bills. So they will take an idea and they will figure out the best way to word the bill, and they'll figure out, kind of whether it's a really a good idea or not. And then the Legislative Budget Board is a board of 10 people who work with the budgets. So they'll draft, analyze, recommend budgets, make sure that everything is balanced. Like I said, Texas has a constitutional provision that requires that our budgets be balanced. Bills take effect 90 days after a passage of a 2/3 majority of each house and is signed by the governor. But again, if the governor doesn't sign it and it's been more than 10 days during session, 20 days after session, then the bill can still take effect if they're not signed by the governor. So when we talk about the committee, what does a committee do when a bill is referred to committee? Well, what a committee does is looks over the bill, debates it inside the committee, decides if it's a good idea or not bad idea. They mark it up. Sometimes they'll say, this bill is great, but I hate this part, or this seems unfair, or this is unclear. And so they'll revise the bill. Sometimes they pigeonhole the bill. So that means they sit on it and don't do anything about it. And it, like sometimes you'll hear us say, like a bill dies in committee. That just means that the bill sits in the committee and never gets presented to the floor for a vote. The committee's decisions rarely disregarded, because the people that are put on the committee because they have some sort of maybe inside knowledge, specialized knowledge. They're there for a reason, and the committees are very specific. And so it's not like you're getting a whole bunch of farmers deciding an education bill or a bunch of educators deciding a farm bill. Usually people that have a background or have a constituency with a strong farming impact will be put on a farming committee, and same with education. The committees are organized by subject and function. So there are standing committees, which are committees that are, we'll talk about this on the next slide, but standing committees are just permanent committees. There's subcommittees, joint committees, something called ad hoc committees, select committees, conference committees, and interim committees. So we'll talk about each of those more specifically. A standing committee is a permanent committee that deals with either substantive, meaning the content of a bill, or procedural, meaning rules associated with whatever House or Senate matters. A subcommittee is just a littler piece of a committee that will deal with a bill first. They'll hold some hearings, they'll make some revisions, and then they report it to the whole committee. So a committee may be, if a committee is 10 people, there may be a subcommittee of 2 people, and they will work on a bill and then present it to the big committee, or the whole committee. A joint committee is a committee that includes people from both chambers of the legislature, so some representatives and some senators. An ad hoc committee is a temporary committee that will just be formed to do one certain thing, like revise a certain bill or deal with a certain problem that is a temporary issue. There are conference committees, which are just ad hoc committees or temporary committees that are formed to resolve a difference between the House bill and the Senate bill. So a conference committee will be appointed after the House has looked at the bill and made, passed their version. The Senate has looked at the bill, passed their version. Then a conference committee will look at the 2 different bills and determine, how can we make both of these be exactly the same. And then there are select committees, which are just temporary committees that will make some sort of a study or investigation into a certain problem and then report back. So a select committee may be formed if there is a problem associated with, I don't know, drilling issues, or let's say voting fraud, something like that. A select committee would be put together, do that investigation, report back to the legislature. And finally, an interim committee is one that meets between sessions, so between those 140 days every other year, and they get ready for the next session. Because if you waited till day one of the 140 days to start thinking at all about anything the legislature had to do, then before you know it, 140 days would be up, nothing would have happened. So basically, when the legislatures report for day one of the session, there's a lot of work that's been done before they got to day one in order to make sure that the time is utilized in the best manner. So the Legislative Audit Committee, some examples of committees are Legislative Audit Committee is a committee that will supervise the state auditor who audits anyone who receives money from the state. So if Tarrant County College receives state money, then the Legislative Audit Committee would supervise the state auditor who may audit Tarrant County College to make sure that Tarrant County College is spending their state money in the correct manner. The Sunset Advisory Committee is a committee that recommends whether different agencies or different organizations should be kept or cut or reorganized or redefined, and they try to make sure that, you know, we don't have just a whole bunch of committees and a whole bunch of agencies that are hanging around that don't really have any purpose anymore. There are conference committees, like we talked about. It's a temporary committee of 5 senators and 5 representatives that will take the 2 versions, the Senate version and the House version of a bill, make them into one version of the bill, and then report back to each of their chambers to pass the bill in the form that's presented, so that we don't have a whole bunch of laws that you have to figure out if you're using the Senate law or the House law. As far as scheduling committees go, there is a House scheduling committee that has a bunch of different calendars depending on the substance of the bill and the debate that's required. And the different House calendars kept by the scheduling committee says when a debate and a vote will happen. Because if the scheduling committee does not schedule a bill for debate or vote, then it's dead. It's never going to be passed and become a law. In the Senate, though, bills are considered in order. So if I submit a bill for, you know, appropriating money for flood relief today, then that is one bill, and then whatever bill is submitted tomorrow, even if it's a way more extensive or way simpler or much more important bill, then that bill submitted after mine is not going to be considered by the Senate until my flood bill is considered. Unless, of course, there can be a suspension of the rule that says that, you know, one bill kind of gets skipped or can leapfrog. 3/5 of the Senate has to vote to suspend the rule, meaning that the bill gets to leapfrog the other bills and get the bill considered. And otherwise, it's just bills are considered chronologically, not by however the house, however they're scheduled on a calendar. So when we talk about floor action is what happens kind of on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. And you can go watch this in normal non-pandemic years and see kind of what's going on. You know, what's being considered. Is anything being considered? How is it working? You know, who's saying what legislators are saying what. You can also watch it online. But floor action is a bunch of debating, amending, and voting on bills. So, you know, when a bill is introduced, there can be a whole lot of debate. A committee may say, this is what we recommend, but then a whole other group of people will say, I want to debate this, I want to talk about this, I want you to, before anybody votes, I want you to hear my side of the story. There must be a quorum, which means 2/3 of the members present to take action. So in order for a bill to be voted on, there have to be 2/3 of the members of either the Senate or the House present. Bills must be read on 3 consecutive days. This, again, is a provision that prevents secrecy. You don't want a committee to hurry up and just read a bill and get the people that are there to vote on it without giving the opportunity of everyone to hear the bill 3 consecutive days. Debate is available for 10 minutes per member if you're in the House, or unlimited in the Senate. And so sometimes you'll see people filibustering, which means just debating an unlimited amount of time. Points of order are used to object that a procedure is not being followed. So, for example, if the leader of the House is allowing 20 minutes per member or 20 minutes for some members, then somebody can call a point of order, and that is an objection that says that the procedure is not being followed. And then votes are recorded per the Constitution, and we don't do yays and nays. That's something that, you know, our Constitution, in its 88,000 words, says that votes must be recorded and there cannot be voice votes. So, before you vote for your next representative or your next House Representative or state senator, you can go and see what they have voted on, what votes they missed, how many times they missed a vote, and what, you know, whether they voted yay or nay on certain issues. There are lots of different tactics that representatives or senators will use to manipulate timing to make a bill either slow down to the end of the session or to speed up and get passed more quickly. There is something called points of order, like we just talked about, that people can raise if the procedure is not being followed, and points of order can take a long time and bog down the discussion. There's something called chubbing, which is, I have to say, something that I've really never heard about until I started teaching this government class. So I never heard about it in high school or college or law school. But chubbing is when the House will debate other bills on the calendar, one of their calendars, in order to delay a vote on a later bill. So basically it's just kind of saying, well, we're not going to take up bill number 3 until we're done debating bill number 2, and we're going to debate bill number 2 for a long time, and so that it basically runs out of time for bill number 3. A filibuster is just a long debate to avoid the passage of a bill. So you may have seen filibusters. There's a famous Wendy Davis filibuster where she stood up and debated all night, all through the night, in order to avoid the passage of a bill. And then the Committee of the Whole in the Senate, if the Senate wants to act, they can devolve into a Committee of the Whole, and they can basically just take a majority vote, and no 3/5 vote is needed, and also no journal is kept, and so nobody can figure out how somebody voted on the bill or not. So what that would be is the Senate would say, we are going to vote to meet as a Committee of the Whole, and then they only have to have a majority vote to pass a bill. And that's a way they can get a bill through quicker if they don't have the 3/5 majority needed, or the number of votes needed. Okay, so let's talk about how a bill would go through this different progression. So I will try to write on again. Let's use green. So let's say, for example, a bill can be introduced in either the House or the Senate. So let's say a bill's introduced in the Texas House. Only a representative may introduce a bill in the House, and only a senator may introduce a bill in the Senate. Sometimes a House of Representatives member and a senator will work together, and they will each introduce a bill in order to speed the process, because otherwise the bill has to be introduced in the House as a House bill, assigned to a committee, which is assigned by the Speaker of the House or the Lieutenant Governor. They would, here it would be the Speaker of the House. It would be assigned to a committee based on its content. So what's it, is it a bill about farming? We'll assign it to a farming related committee. Then the committee has to meet and discuss the bill. Sometimes they would debate, they would call witnesses to oppose the bill in order to let those people be heard. They may talk to lobbyists, they may mark up the bill. A subcommittee, for example, can take the bill, mark it up, say these pieces don't work, or we're not going to be able to pass it if we include this language, and then the bill goes back to the committee. And all of these things can take a whole lot of time. And sometimes a bill goes to more than one committee, and so this is happening simultaneously across a number of committees. So after the committee reports on the bill and says we recommend this bill, then the bill is put on a calendar, the House calendar in this example, and it's one of the calendars by a calendar committee, and it says when the House is going to consider the bill. So it, juggles. It has 140 days, and the calendar committees decide where in that 140 days the bill is going to actually be heard. When the bill is heard, the Speaker of the House will sometimes recognize people on the House floor to talk about the bill. Somebody who sponsored the bill reads the bill. There's some debate that is on the House floor, and we saw that it's 10 minutes per House member Sometimes they will yield their time to another House member so that somebody gets more time. And then at this time, after the House has a chance to hear the bill, the House can be voted down. I mean, the bill can be voted down, saying it's just done. The House is not going to pass this bill. They can change the bill. They can send the bill back to committee for some amendments or some more discussion or some more information. But assuming that the House passes the bill, then the bill would be sent to the Senate. And so it would be introduced to the Senate as House Bill whatever, House Bill 1, House Bill whatever number, because it was a bill that originated in the House. And so it's introduced in the Senate. At this time, it would be assigned to a Senate committee, which would, and this is when a committee, and it would take action. So the committee may rewrite it. They may send it to one of its subcommittees for comment, for their own set of hearings, their own set of debate. Then the committee takes action. Again, the committee can refuse to to recommend the bill for consideration by the whole floor, or by the whole chamber. The committee can pass it. They can pass it with amendments. And so then once the committee recommends the bill be put on the calendar, then the bill is put on the calendar. And remember, the calendar is just sequentially numbering the bills. And so basically they're in order of how they come out of committee. And so if your bill comes out of committee today, then it's going to be considered before the bills that come out of committee tomorrow. Sometimes you can again suspend this rule, and bills can be considered out of order, but generally that's the way it happens. After, when it reaches its day on the calendar, then the bill is introduced by the Lieutenant Governor to, well, it's introduced to the Senate floor, and then the Lieutenant Governor has the power to call on different senators who want to speak. If there's a tie, then the Lieutenant Governor can break that tie. The bill's sponsor may come over from the House and read it to the Senate chamber. The Senate can debate, and you saw that there's an unlimited time for debate. They may add some things to the bill. And then after, if the bill is passed, then if there have been any amendments placed by the Senate, if the bill does not look exactly like it looked when it came into number 6 here, then the conference committee will be established to make sure that the bill that was passed in number 5 and the bill that was passed in number 10 are the same bill. And so once the conference committee has worked that out, then the bill is sent back, the one bill is sent back for final passage of each of the chambers. And this is what we talked about. There has to be no voice vote. This is a recorded vote. And if both chambers pass the bill, then the bill is sent to the governor. And the governor can have a lot of different options. They may sign it into a law. The governor could not sign it. In that case, it becomes a law after 10 days during session, 20 days after session, or the governor can veto it. Now, if the governor vetoes the bill, then the bill can still live if 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate agree to override the veto, then that's what would happen. The bill becomes a law. So let's talk about impeachment. So if there is an executive or judicial branch member that needs to be removed from office, then the process for that is impeachment. The House would vote to impeach, which is just like charging them with a crime, and it would be the Senate who would vote to punish, which would mean remove somebody from office, potentially. So this is a lot like the federal system. If you want to take, for example, when Donald Trump was impeached, it was the House that voted to impeach him. So he was impeached, but the Senate did not vote to remove him from office. So he was impeached but not removed. The standard of consideration is whether the executive or judicial branch member committed high crimes or misdemeanors. And that's, just a myriad of different things. And that's the interpretation is something that, is discussed in light of the circumstances. If it's a legislative branch member who has done something that warrants them either being punished or removed from office, then it's called redress. And there can be a committee that issues the redress, and what that means is a committee can be formed by either the Senate or the House or both, and they investigate a senator or a House member, and they determine what the discipline should be. So federally, we've had, well, not all federally, but we did have Jim Ferguson, who was impeached. Remember, this was later Ma Ferguson, his wife, ran and said even though he was impeached, removed from office, and prohibited from holding office again, if she was elected governor, which she was, then she would, wink, wink, let him make all the decisions. And so you'd get 2 governors for the price of 1. In the federal government, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and also Donald Trump have been impeached. Now, they weren't removed from office, but they were impeached. So that is the end of the legislative branch. And this is one of the 3 branches of the Texas government that is addressed in the Texas Constitution and is the basis of the Texas government.